Testing, testing. What is up, Facebook and YouTube? Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are tuning into today. Thank you so much for joining, guys. My name is Nick Bell. I'm your Line 6 product specialist for today. And what I thought would be cool is to go over the latest and greatest, being Pod Express Edit. So there's our Pod Express unit. Here's our Pod Express editor. So I'm just going to be diving into this, messing around with some tones for the next 30 minutes. And, really this is a great placeholder, just for us to have a conversation. Any questions you have, whether it's for Pod Express or, really anything. But yeah, today we're going to be focusing on Pod Express Edit and just seeing everything we can do with this thing. And I think this has been one of the most requested items to add on the docket when it comes to Pod Express, is having a desktop editor. So what we have here is, pretty much a segue into making Pod Express, a very powerful recording tool, a desktop recording tool, if you will, and even being on the go, because you can get this on, in addition to your computer, you could also get this on your mobile device. So even if you're, not recording and you're just out and about, you can use your phone and get into the weeds here. So for example, when, we look at the reverb, right here on the product, what we have is you have this, what we used to call swooshes, right? Where it's just going to increase, the level and even the decay of the reverb, right? So you're essentially only controlling two parameters when you're moving one of these effects knobs around. But then when we look on Pod Express Edit, we see what's happening. As I increase, I just went to a new reverb, but as I increase the level, or the intensity of the reverb knob, we'll see what happens is the mix is turning up as well as the decay. But there's also some other parameters here, pre-delay, low cut, high cut, level. And the same goes on for the amp. So we're just going to kind of dive into each of these and, and just, have some fun. But first off, let's see how we're sounding. That's a lot of reverb because we were just messing around with that. So I'm going to reload us up here. Let's see how we're sounding. So everything's looking good on my end. If anything sounds weird or anything of that nature, let me know. So let's just dive on in here. So what I'm using today are just the presets. I haven't created anything on my own. So if you were to, pull a Pod Express out of the box or go to your Pod Express, I'm not doing anything different than what's fresh out of the box here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right over to Dynamic. Is it Dynamic or Crunch? One of these are my favorite. Yeah, definitely that Crunch. Very good tone, right? So taking a look here, what we see in Pod Express Edit is you have your entire signal chain laid out for you. So obviously we start with our gate, then our distortion, our modulation. So these three items are processing before the amp model. And then we have our amp model right in the center. And then of course that's running into our cabinet, our delay, and then our reverb. So if I were to turn the cabinet off and, use, let's say, an external cab simulator or IR loader, you'll still have that delay and that reverb after the amp. So it should all play very nicely. Although I will say the cabinets in Pod Express are just phenomenal. And these are using the same IR-based engine that we have in Helix and HX products. And so obviously I can't move the mic or the distance here, so our sound design team actually, dialed these in. So, what I really like about Pod Express is I just kind of plug in and I have a great tone, right? Don't get me wrong, I love opening up Helix and HX and, getting really in the weeds and choosing my mics and my placements and stuff. But when I just want to play, I'll just plug into this and, and that guesswork's kind of already done for me. So let's see who we got in the chats today. We have Johnny Bean. How you doing, Johnny? Pleasure to see you. Tom Foolery, good to see you again. Thank you for coming. So it's just preset up and down. Can you MIDI map anything in a DAW? So unfortunately with Pod Express, there's not a whole lot of MIDI over USB stuff going on. So unfortunately, no. That would be more for like, anything from like a Helix native or, really any Helix or HX device minus HX1. Or even HX1, yeah. HX1 can receive CC and program changes, but not Pod Express, and then when you look at that $179 price point, things like MIDI mapping or stuff of that nature may not be a part of the package, just to keep that in a good price point that we're looking at. But what we have here is, starting off is we have our noise gate, which I'm sure we're all pretty familiar with our noise gate. Now, able to get to the noise gate without the editor, you have to, push, Alt and the tap and, move stuff on the pedal. But it's nice having this right up front. Kind of have it set. It's a little high for me on the crunch, so maybe I'll drop this down to around 60, 500 milliseconds is good. You don't want that gate to cut you off too soon. But I feel like anywhere around 300 works for me. Of course, depending on the kind of guitar you're using and how much distortion you're using, this will shift. And so what I like here is, when you look at the distortions, for example, or really any model, you'll see an image on what these are modeled after. Now you'll notice we just have boost or distortion or overdrive, and so obviously I know that's going to be our Minotaur from our HX model set. And then overdrive, obviously, that's a tube screamer, right? So if you're curious on what these are, just take a quick gander at the images and, or even take a look at the owner's manual. Now I put some stuff together where, just taking a look here, we could see what is what. So for example, that fuzz being that bighorn fuzz, and these were all derived from, Helix and HX, right? And so if you're familiar with HX modeling, then all of these will just, pretty much be second nature to you. So one of my favorites to use is that Klon model, which we call the Minotaur. So I'll keep the gain anywhere around 2-ish, this and that. Now when it comes to modulation, sometimes I like to use a chorus or, even a phaser, when it comes time, so I could always open up the chorus and then take a look here. We have all those parameters at our fingertips. And so here I have the sync button. So currently I have just, without the sync on, I'm controlling the rate like you would with, any traditional stomp box. But as soon as we click sync, it's now going to sync the timing of this effect to your tap tempo. And what I really like about the editor is I could tap in a tempo, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And looks like I was close to 120. Otherwise, I could just go right in and type in an exact parameter. So, when you're recording along with music and stuff, and you have any time-based effects, being delay and modulation, you could sync these up to your timing of the song that you're recording, and you'll be locked in. Now, a little trick I learned a long time ago when it comes to something like a modulation or even a flanger, if you want to be locked in really tight to your to the song you're jamming to or recording to, I always like to move the note value down to a whole, and I just feel like it just meshes very, very well. So if I go back to this clean, we have no distortion. Let's pull up that chorus again. Granted, we don't have any, a song to play to or a click track, but this will kind of give you an idea. Currently, we're at 120 BPMs, and the default here is a half a note. A nice smooth chorus, but now let's move that down to a whole note and see if we notice a difference. So very minor, but to me, you could definitely hear that. You know, obviously it's a chorus and its waveform. It's a little slowed down, so it feels a little more lush to me. So of course, you know, do as you will. But I always felt, you know, and this goes with, you know, really, you know, any type of chorus or modulation that you're using. You know, if you're able to set its timing to a whole note subdivision, I just feel like it plays very nicely. Otherwise, you know, go back old school and, you know, move that knob to, you know, maybe it's a 50%. That's your sweet spot, right? You know, you can revert back to that, but if you want to make sure you're always in time, that's what I really like. Once you get past the half a note, it starts to sound a little, you know, it's a little different compared to what I'm used to or what I'm going after, right? And so with that, you could kind of use that chorus as a bit kind of like it almost sounds like a Leslie, right? Like a rotating speaker. And so you could have a lot of fun. And of course, maybe if we move the depth down, go into the second page here, even the third page, I think we're going to get stuff like Headroom and Spread. And if you have any questions on what those parameters are, I'm more than happy to dive in. But let's take a look here. We can make the depth nice and deep, and then the tone go, you know, kind of bring it up a bit on the higher end. And you know what? I may just slow that rate down. A 30-second is, you know, pretty quick. What about like just a 16th? Oh yeah, right? Maybe a little too quick. Let's do like a dotted or just an eighth. Quarter note doesn't sound bad. You know. You know, you get the idea, right? And so that chorus can do a lot for you as opposed to being just, you know, your nice lush chorus. Okay, so I've been getting stuck on that. It looks like we've had some questions or some comments come in. Let's see here. Going through, everything is looking good on my end. On the telephone, the Footswitch change is shown immediately on the editor app. So let's see. Helix Native cannot map presets, only Snapshot. That would be a nice change for Helix Native. Also a dedicated Footswitch controller for Native. Thanks for answering. Cheers. Thank you, Tom. So, yeah, you know, a dedicated Footswitch controller for Native, you know, whether, you know, you could even do that with, you know, if you have any Helix or HX device, you know, you could do hotkey commands, right? You know, and then you can, you know, you can assign, you know, record, play, stop, you know, stuff with the DAW. But if you really want to get in there with Helix Native, gosh, I forget what it's called, but you can get in there and map, you know, parameters to shift, things to turn off and on. Since it's been a while that I've been in Helix Native, I forget what they're called, but you can actually get into the weeds and have specific values set at a certain time within your project and stuff. And so diving into those, it's a bit time consuming, but man, if you have a song or just everything kind of mapped out, you can do that with Helix Native, and you know, you essentially would never have to touch a Footswitch or anything. But it definitely takes some time. I'm sorry, I can't remember that off the top of my head. If I were to open up Native right now, I could easily look it up. Let's see. When using the mobile app on a tablet or phone, are the Footswitch changes shown immediately in the editor? So in regards to Footswitch changes, what we can do with Footswitch, and this is from Scott. Let's see, Scott Dimmick. Thank you so much for your question, Scott. So pretty much what you're seeing right now is what you get from the editor. I could press the little gear cog and I could get into global settings, and I can adjust, you know, the Footswitch functions, including the assignments for Footswitch 3 and 4. But obviously, you know, if I go in and I want to move some amp parameters around, you'll see that happening. So for example, there's the drive moving, and then I could see that that's what I'm doing here. Go back to the editor and we see that's what's going on. If I change if I bypass, we got that. If I change a preset, we got that as well. Now, Footswitch assignments, now there's pretty much a couple things you can do. Now, you could either, for the on assign, so these are your two foot switches, right? Your on and your tap. So I could go in and I could choose whether the on foot switch bypasses all the effects or one of the effect categories. And the same goes for the tap foot switch. That's what you've got there. So you're not going to have an actual visual representation because there's only two foot switches. So this will suffice. And again, you could go in and say, hey, you know what? I want, foot switch 1 to control, the distortion. I want foot switch, the tap foot switch 2 to control maybe reverb. You can do that. And then of course your external foot switches, you could assign those as well. So you have, essentially 4 actions that you can control. Otherwise, default is tap tempo and the tuner, as well as bypass. And so that's what you're going to get there, Scott. Great question. Also, on mobile and tablet, would it theoretically be possible to use a Bluetooth MIDI controller to program changes in the app itself to select presets, toggle effects on and off? Great question, Scott. So currently, what I'm seeing, no. There's really no area to set up MIDI, and there's no MIDI over USB. So no, unless you're able to find a program that will control a third-party application, I guess it's possible, but the app and the device itself isn't designed or set up for that. But again, we do have many other products that can be. So good stuff there. Scott Dimmick, no MIDI mapping available for the Pod Express. Thank you, Tom. I'm asking if using Bluetooth MIDI controller to control the app phone itself would theoretically work. So Scott, I think you're asking a question that goes beyond at least my line 6 scope here. And so I can tell you what this app can or can't do, but I really don't have any answers for third-party controllers or applications. So I don't know what is possible with other stuff out there, but what I can tell you here with the app and the device itself, there is no MIDI implementation or any avenue set up where a third-party MIDI device could do stuff, right? So, lack for better words. So good stuff there. Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Tom. You guys are awesome. So Oscar, please explain headroom and spread. So you're going to see that in a lot with mostly time-based effects, but you'll also see, you may see headroom in like filtering and other effects too. So for you, Pod Express bass guys out there who have, a different effect category than we do here, you may see that. So let's just make it easy. We'll go to let's go to this digital delay. And so what do we have here? This one doesn't have it. Let's see, analog, do we have it here? You'll notice some have it and some don't. Okay, so spread. And then you'll also notice scale too. So that's another one to speak about too. But Oscar, let's cover those 2 parameters that you asked about. So headroom, what's really cool about headroom is it's literally, how can I say this, is when you increase headroom on a delay or modulation, whatever it may be, you're essentially going to bring up the level of that delay, let's say. So it reacts different than level, because if I turn up level, it's literally going to turn up anything passing through delay. If I turn up level, it's going to be louder. So the delay will be louder and my guitar. It's essentially just a volume boost for this effect. Now headroom isn't going to raise the sound of your incoming guitar. It is going to raise the volume of the actual delay. And it's pretty minute, but there may be times where you're using a really, kind of a distorted sound and you really want to hear that delay. That'll really, really help. So I believe it was analog that had it. Yep. And so let's see if we could, it may be hard to hear this over a live stream, but let's just go to something nice. Let's see what we got here. Quarter. So before I go there, this is scale. So if we put scale to to maximum values, I'm going to get a perfect quarter note slapback. But you'll notice if I turn scale down, and you'll notice lots of them are set to 7.5. So what this is doing is, as I turn it down, it's going to delay the right side by 750 milliseconds, I believe. So now you're going to hear almost kind of like a dotted eighth thing. So since one side is delayed by 750 milliseconds, you get this kind of ping pong delay type sound. So if you just want a straight up quarter or a straight up eighth note and scale is affected, turn it to 10 all the way up, so there is zero delay on the right side. You get a perfect, let's say, quarter note. So if you're looking to kind of thicken it up a bit, turn that scale down. Now let's go over to Headroom. Headroom is set to 0, nothing else, right? Let's turn Headroom up to, let's say, all the way. You'll notice those repeats are a bit louder. Let's go back to 0. Now it's a little softer. What happens if we turn it down, negative 12 dB? It's a lot more subtle. Now this isn't a huge change, but I've used Headroom in situations where maybe the delay isn't coming through. Now when you're using Helix or an HX device, you could always run a parallel path, and when you run a parallel path, you really hear each effect on its own path come through very nicely and very clean. Now in a situation like this where we don't have a parallel path, using that Headroom can greatly help bring up that effect in your mix. And honestly, like if you have a tone with maybe like a lot of low end, or maybe it's just a little too fuzzy or distorted, and so you don't hear that delay as much as you'd like, turn that Headroom up. Now spread is literally a stereo thing. The higher the value, the wider that stereo image is going to be. So usually you'll see the user default is set to halfway. So you've been hearing that quarter note, right? So if I turn spread all the way down to 0, you're essentially going to get like a mono type of repeat. So that's smack dab in the center. Let's go to half, where it's where the default is. Now it's a little wider. Now let's go all the way to 10. And again, it may be hard to hear if you're listening on a phone or a computer or a laptop. If you're using headphones, it may sound even better. Let's hear 10. So it's even it sounds a lot wider by doing that spread. Now, if I were to do something I think we got a ping pong in here, right? So let's go to a pong, and let's see what its spread is. So its spread is all the way up, so you can really hear it's a ping pong delay, right? So you want to hear it go from left to right. Let's hear what happens when we turn the spread down. You just have all these delays, boom, 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 right in the center. Let's turn it back up to its default, which is 10. You hear it more in the left and the right. So that's what you're going to get with Headroom, spread, and even that scale parameter. And so even though the scale is very obvious, right? But although these are subtle, when you're putting a tone together and maybe even throw it into a mix with a song, these parameters will definitely can become your friend. So great question there, Oscar, much appreciated. Good stuff there, and it looks like we don't have much of any other questions, so I'm just going to carry on. Got about another 5-6 minutes here. So what I think is really cool about PodExpress Edit is that we have access to power amp parameters. And so when I talk about power amp parameters, we also call these field controls. And for those of us who have been following our live streams for a while, you'll know, I'm sure you'll recall that we dive into these every now and then, because I think they're some of the most unused parameters. And this is really how you can make amps your own. How you can really find those little tonalities of amps that draw you to that amp. Because as you know, any amp you play into, they all sound a bit different. They all offer something a little different. Especially used amps that have been on the road and stuff, because they've all been tweaked and stuff, and that's what's just so cool about them. So anyways, so we have access to these power amp controls. Power amp controls start at the master volume and continue on. So when you're writing presets, use that channel volume. It's only going to control the volume of the amp, thus the entire preset. Now, once we move over to master, now we are adjusting the tonality of the amp. And so the master volume controls how hard that power amp is pushing. So if you want less saturation, turn that master volume down. And you know what? Turn off your delay as well. We could turn that master real down. And then turn the channel volume up. But then if I turn that channel volume down so we don't blow our ears away, and then crank the master volume up, now we're going to get a lot more saturation. It's too much saturation for me. A completely different sound. Almost fuzzy in a way. Let's turn that master volume down to about half and see what we got here. Let me do that. You see, now it's starting to sound like the amp could breathe, right? So that's what you're going to get from master. Sag is going to, it sags the units, so you get a little bit of that brown sound, if you will, that EVH brown sound. And then the HBE and then the fat parameters, these are just part of that amp model. Again, in the power amp section, ripple is a characteristic of the output transformer, and so I like turning this up with most amps, and you'll notice when the master volume's turned up and you're pushing that amp model, ripple, bias, and bias X, that's where you're really going to start hearing some differences. So ripple to me just gives the amp a little attitude, if you will. And again, you're not going to hear it. Maybe you may not really hear it over Facebook or YouTube. But that's why we call these field controls. It's not so much an audible thing, it's more of a feel thing. Because as you know, with our true point-to-point modeling, we're able to capture that reaction and what's going on with that, with whatever we're modeling. And so this is where you're really going to, get into an amp's feel by moving these around. So with me, when it comes to a crunchy amp or a heavy amp, I always like to move the ripple up. I'll keep the bias where it's at, because if we turn up the bias, as you know with an amp, as you turn up a bias, you're going to increase the resting stage of your output transformer, or you're going to make a hotter type of an amp. So this usually adds a little more distortion, but it also kind of adds a brittle type of class A voxiness to the sound. And so I may turn this up just a little bit, or sometimes I'll turn it down if I'm going for that like EVH type of a sound. You move it around to your discretion. Then bias X, it's kind of a bias excursion, as they call it. So they kind of say it's like a mix of sag and bias all in one. So pretty much in layman's, if you want a tighter low end, turn bias X down. If you want a looser low end, turn the bias X up. And so if it really depends what kind of music or what kind of vibe you're in, but move this around and find what works best for you. At least with these two parameters, there's definitely no right or wrong. It's all on what feels good to you. And so I just wanted to take attention to those parameters because, I think they're really cool. They're parameters that I'm always messing around with, and they're the one set of amp parameters that I've gotten probably the most questions on, or even been told by other users, like, oh yeah, bias that, the excursion, like I'm not really sure what those are, so I never touch them. And so definitely dive into those and move them around, and you can really make that amp your own, or you may be able to get that that chime or that Marshall-y sounding amp, you know, you may be able to get that model a little closer to what maybe you were used to with a traditional amplifier. Let's see what we got here. Bringing on breakdown. All right, what's up, man? Line 6 is my favorite home studio gear. That's great to hear. They definitely make it easy to get great tone whenever, wherever. So we dived into the delays, and you know, we looked into the difference between headroom, spread, and then scale as well. And then of course we have our reverbs, and so one of my favorite reverbs would be oh gosh, you know, the spring one is great, the hall is really good, and even space. So if you're looking to you know, kind of do some really ambient stuff, you could always throw on space, throw on a little bit of chorus here, you know, and I'll just do a whole note. And then for the mix, maybe I'll go down to about 4. And right now we're going through a US Princess, the 110, and the US Princess is, looking at my little thing here, is essentially, I have my little notes here. The 110 Princess is just the 110 Princess, and then we have the 112 US Deluxe. So these two cabs definitely are similar, but they have, you know, a bit of a different tone to them. So let's turn off our reverb and even our chorus, actually, and hear the differences we get between these. So that's what we get with the 110, nice and clean tone, right? Let's move over to the 112. I feel like the 112, you know, I've always been used to a 12-inch speaker at least, right? I think most of us. So I'm going to choose that one. Let's go to the reverb and choose a nice spacey sound. And this is a pretty wide reverb. This sounds like the mix is cranked up. Yep, right at half. So we could turn that down a bit. Add a little chorus into that. And now we have a nice little spacey, not spacey, but, you know, kind of a pretty ambient tone here. And so you can just move up, just keep moving stuff around and have fun with that. But, you know, my favorite guys would have to be either the lead or the crunch. And then what I like to do with my cabs is I'll go to like the low cut, drop it anywhere from like 40 to 50 hertz, and then just take a little bit of high-end sizzle, you know, just off of it, because, you know, you go into any studio with your modeler or even a traditional amp, whoever's behind the board is definitely, you know, definitely essentially doing something like this, you know, moving off some high-end and some low-end. You know, very rarely have I ever been in a recording session where they just throw a mic in front of your amp and it just it just sounds great, right? You know, sometimes you just got to go in there and move a couple things around. And so I like to back off a little bit of the highs and a little bit of the low end. And essentially, this is my sound right here. This is what I'm totally happy with. It just sounds good, feels good. So guys, that is Pod Express Edit. You know, we dove into everything you can do with the signal chain. We also took a look at, you know, additional settings with the global settings here. So as you can see, really quick and easy to get in those global settings, although you can still access them from the device itself. But what's also really cool, just like our other editors with Pod Go and Helix and HX devices, you have all the same functionality where I can move presets around. I could continue. I could even copy this preset, go down here, and then paste it. And so you can move really quickly throughout the application. I could also click the little cloud here and quickly go to update my product, or my device, although it is already up to date. Looking back here, I could you know, take the librarian out of the equation, and now I have a nice, just clean looking editor. But then what we can also do is save certain presets or export presets, and you can share presets with the community. So you can go on our website on Custom Tone and post your presets, or if you're looking just for something that's curated for you already, go on our Custom Tone page on our website, and you could just download presets, right? And so Pod Express has been around for a little while, so I assume there's got to be some presets up there from our users. So definitely check that out. Other than that, that is pretty much it. We also looked at the tap tempo and how you're able to change the BPM and move about presets that way. As you can tell and as you can see, I feel like HX Edit was that final piece to complete the puzzle, and it just makes it super easy for reamping, and it just turned my Pod Express into the ultimate recording tool, right? Because of this. So without further ado, thank you guys so much for joining. Stick a fork in me, I'm done, as some would say. Taking a look here, just want to direct your attention to our lessons here. For now, they are free. Feel free to go to line6.com/events to have a one-on-one lesson for up to an hour with a Line 6 product specialist. And anything that's current, any Line 6 product, hit us up and we'll have a nice session. And how much stuff can you get for free nowadays? So other than that, thank you guys so much. Until the next time, we will see you at the next stream. Thank you.